Which is where we finally get to socialist Eastern Germany, also known as the GDR, the German Democratic Republic. After its founding in the late 1940s, alongside its bigger brother the Soviet Union, the GDR first went through a few hopeful years, which then quickly turned into decades of decline. The thing is, in Germany, nobody had to introduce or invent the Dr. sausage, because Germany had its own super rich tradition of making sausages. Plus, you know, the city of Bologna was just a few hundred kilometers away from the border. In fact, the good old Jagdwurst, which means something like hunter's sausage actually, probably got its name from the fact that people could take it with them when they went hunting for a quick and easy snack. An MRE. But that was just like one among hundreds of types of sausages. No, when it comes to like huge scale mass production, I think there is no doubt that the popularity of the Soviet Dr. sausage inspired the GDR to produce tons and tons and tons of Jagdwurst. And yes, I know, technically speaking, Jagdwurst is not exactly the same as Dr. sausage, because there were little pieces of ham and pork belly kind of spread out in between the sausage, and the spice mix might have been a little bit different, but come on, it's a close cousin for sure. But taking this type of sausage and turning it into a schnitzel? Well, I checked with my grandma, and no, that was definitely not a thing in the Soviet Union. No, this type of schnitzel was definitely a product of the creativity of Eastern German chefs, who kind of had to use what was there to recreate classics of German cuisine. And you know, in terms of availability, in terms of convenience, and in terms of price, of course, processed sausage, Jagdwurst, was unbeatable. Whew, history lessons are getting longer and longer, I feel. Anyhow, I am mighty hungry now, so let's make that communist schnitzel, shall we? And look, while you can probably find some type of Jagdwurst or Dr. sausage or bologna in your local grocery store, these are usually packed with all sorts of additives these days. We went over that. So I figured, what if we try to kind of come up with something that actually resembles the original, but this time we actually know what's inside. So here's my recipe for a homemade Dr. sausage that I'll be making with a few adjustments, but mostly sticking to Mika Jan's original recipe, which starts with 80% lean pork, ideally without connective tissue or silver skin, and then 20% beef. I'm just using regular supermarket ground beef here. As I mentioned before, salt and a bit of sugar make up most of the seasoning, with only small amounts of cardamom and nutmeg for a bit of extra fragrance. A little bit goes a long way. To help my food processor along, I'll also add a little bit of milk, and then we start blending. This is only the first phase, so take it easy. You want to get a sticky paste, but don't overdo it. This tends to be a tough job for the food processor. So this is our sausage base, but we need to add a few more things to get it right. First, I'm adding eggs. Quite a bit more than the original recipes would have called for. The reason is that they get us a lot closer to the sort of gummy consistency we're used from an industrial Dr. sausage. Then I'm just adding a bit of baking powder, which tenderizes the meat a little and also helps the texture. And finally, I'm simply adding some red food coloring. Now, originally this sausage is made with curing salt, which is both good for shelf life and also gives it its like nice pink color. But you know, health concerns aside, I want this to be an easy and home-friendly version, so I want to keep things simple. I actually tried using pureed beets as a coloring here as well, but while that worked sometimes, it yielded very inconsistent results, so you know, food coloring it is. Blend again until you get an emulsified paste that's as smooth as your food processor will allow. And I know, it doesn't exactly look appetizing, but come on, that's what we gotta do. Spread it out on a piece of parchment paper and carefully roll into a tube. Now twist the ends shut, a little something like this, and then holding onto the two ends to create tension, carefully poke a few holes into the top of your sausage roll to allow steam to escape later on. You also want to cut off both ends of the parchment paper roll, leaving them somewhat loose with just 1 or 2 centimeters intact. The reason here is that we're eventually going to place the sausage in a steamer and gently steam it for 40 minutes on a calm simmer, not a roiling boil. The sausage will expand during that time, so if you don't leave some slack, it's 100% going to burst out and create a huge mess. Let's hope that doesn't happen and you get a pretty sausage like this one, which you want to dunk into ice cold water for a few minutes before unwrapping. Check this out. Kind of looks like like the real deal, I think. Now, I really don't like using plastic wrap normally, but in this case, it's really the perfect tool. Wrap your sausage in that, twist and tie the ends shut, and cut off the excess. Congratulations, comrade! You made homemade doktorskaya kolbasa. You know what? I think considering we skipped pretty much the entire industrial process, we actually got something quite passable, and it surprisingly even tastes and smells very close to the original. I'm not surprised by the result. It tastes just a lot more natural, but close in flavor. Maybe I might have gone a tiny little bit heavy on the spices, but overall, I think we're pretty close. You can keep that in the fridge and eat it for breakfast or whenever, but you know, that is not what we're here for. We want to cut off a few generous slices, around 1 to 2 centimeters in thickness, and then we set up a classic breading station. First, cover your sausage slices in flour, then in a beaten egg mixture, and finally, generously toss them in breadcrumbs. This almost looks like a legit schnitzel, except it's not. In a frying pan, add enough frying oil to at least half cover the schnitzels and then drop them all in. Since the sausage is conveniently pre-cooked, all you gotta pay attention to is not to burn your breadcrumbs. Fry until the schnitzels are golden brown on both sides and get them out on a paper towel. It's actually pretty good. I set the bar for my expectations pretty low, so it was an easy one, but this one definitely exceeded them. It's not gourmet, but it's delicious. Also, can we just appreciate the crispiness for just a second? It's breaded and fried, so it can't be that bad, right? I'll admit, I was pretty surprised by how good this tasted. I mean, granted, it's deep fried food, so almost anything will taste when it's cooked like that, but still, kudos. Better than expected. But obviously, you don't just eat schnitzels by themselves. So, to recreate the full experience, we have to make the good old socialist tomato sauce that anybody who's ever lived in Eastern Germany will remember very, very well. We start by melting a good amount of butter, then adding a finely diced onion and frying until translucent. Then we add some flour, which will basically turn this into a roux and help to thicken the sauce. Before we add any extra liquid, we want to go in with tomato paste and incorporate that evenly. Season with a bit of extra salt and sugar, and then we add, well, a whole lot of ketchup. Look, I know it seems a little bit unusual to add this much of, tomato ketchup, which is such an American thing, to a very socialist dish, but that stuff was actually pretty popular. Now, just add enough water to create the consistency you like, and then blend everything with a hand mixer in the pan until nice and homogeneous. Don't use a non-stick pan, guys. Finally, we're adding some spiral-shaped pasta that I pre-cooked beforehand, which was definitely a favorite shape in Eastern Germany. And we're mixing until our noodles are evenly coated, and then serving. Big heap of ketchup pasta, topped with 2 or 3 schnitzels, and there you have it, guys. This is the dish of former socialist Germany. And I'll admit, there's kind of something magical about this very almost absurdly sweet pasta in combination with the probably weirdest schnitzel I've ever had. Now, will it enter my repertoire of things I like to cook? No, I'll stick to my favorite chicken schnitzel, thank you very much. But you know what? The homemade doctor sausage by itself? Maybe that will. If you eat it right, that is. And the right way to eat doctor sausage, at least according to me, probably hasn't changed ever since Mika Jan introduced it to the masses. I'll let my grandma explain.
Ну, лучший вариант – это бутерброд. Во-первых, надо взять очень красивый, вкусный, свежий белый хлеб.
Белый, именно белый.
Белый, только белый, который вот так пружинит. Намазать хорошим слоем хорошего масла, не соленого.
Не соленого.
Нет, сверху положить хороший кусок докторской колбасы. И вот так взять, откусить и медленно жевать, чтобы это послевкусие